Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Virati.
Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to Books Are the Basis. We are celebrating the Books Are the Basis Week 2023. And our this year's topics is Seeing the World Through the Eyes of Srila Prabhupada's books, Shastra Chakshu. And today we have with us His Grace Mahatma Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for joining us on this subject matter.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just briefly introducing our guest, Mahatma Prabhu. I was born in Los Angeles and he came in touch with Krishna consciousness at the age of 19 in 1969. Came in touch with Prabhupada's books and then with Prabhupada himself, met Prabhupada personally in Los Angeles. And January 70, Prabhupada joined the ashram in Berkeley, California, received initiation, and then over the years served in many different capacities as a temple president, Sankirtan leader, college preaching, many different aspects. And today, Prabhu serves as a Diksha Guru, initiating spiritual master. He's also a very well-known teacher, shares Krishna consciousness in a very accessible way and reaches out not only to devotees, but also to the public in general. He's also known for his music, of course, and especially also for his writings and his seminars, different workshops on topics such as japa, forgiveness, humility. And yeah, today Prabhu lives in Alachua together with his wife Janava and his daughter Pracha Sundari, and also travels from time to time, several months a year, to inspire devotees. So thank you for being with us. And the topic that we have chosen to talk with you is, as we said, Shastra Chakshu, seeing the world or seeing different topics that are relevant in the world through the eyes of Prabhupada's books. And we like to talk about mental health, or specifically mental health issues or people that have problems with mental health. And this is a topic of great concern. When we look, there is different statistic. The global mental health statistic says that 970 million people around the world struggle with some mental illness or depression. And one in four people will be affected by mental illness at some point in their lives. So it's just many people are affected by it. And they also say that more than 14%, 1/4 of death worldwide, that means about 8 million deaths each year, are attributed to mental disorders. So, and it's increasing, with the pandemic didn't really help, and then also war and all the different situations in the world. So more and more people are affected by difficulties, mental illnesses. So yeah, we like to look at this and see, what can Krishna consciousness offer, and also what did Srila Prabhupada say about the topic. So interesting topics. So maybe we can start with just seeing what could be possible reason that so many people experiencing depression, mental health issues nowadays from a Krishna conscious perspective.
Yeah, well, life is difficult. There's a lot of talk about trauma nowadays. And I often think, when I think of trauma, taking birth was quite traumatic. Being in material existence, so just being here can be quite depressing. And it's interesting that Arjuna was on the battlefield lamenting or depressed, and it's kind of like, okay, this is natural, normal. But I think we need to distinguish between depression as a mental health issue and depression as a life issue that we all face, because they're different. Generally, from a clinical perspective, depression is a forerunner to suicide. That's like when you're in that depressed state, you feel like there's no reason to live. And you have to have even a reason to get out of bed. And it gets to a point where you don't even have a reason to get out of bed, and then you become suicidal. So that's a real problem. It's a real issue. But it's different than a common issue when someone says, I'm depressed. My brother got in a big fight with me, or my girlfriend left me, or my best friend got in an accident, or I lost my job, or I'm overly stressed, things like that. So the causes may be different. One may be biological, physiological, neurological, and one may be situational. And so I think we need to distinguish between where Krishna consciousness and what Krishna consciousness can help and what it can help, because if we don't distinguish that, then we will try to help ourselves in ways that may prove helpful to a certain degree in Krishna consciousness. Obviously, Krishna consciousness is going to help, but there may be, for certain devotees, issues that it's not going to address. And devotees need to understand that, who have those issues, and leaders need to understand it also. But I can say one thing, that the figures that you're talking about, these are like massive figures that means it's affecting everybody. I think 25% of the people have thought about suicide, or at least, I don't know exactly, but large numbers of people have thought, not tried, but thought about, life is difficult. And so people that, one of the major causes of I would distinguish like clinical mental health issues, clinical disorders, and psychological challenges, and traumas and so forth, because there's a gray area, and serious, neurosis, schizophrenia, these things.
Yeah.
One common cause is our upbringing, how we were raised, what we did when we were young, and now with social media comparisons, that's very depressing, and body shaming, and expectations, and all these things. But specifically, the most common problem of psychological, I wouldn't say mental disorders, but that also sometimes is just what people went through as children, maybe raised in an alcoholic family, raised by one parent, neglected, the parent's busy, all these things deeply affect children. High expectations, good parents with high expectations, that's caused a lot of people to lose self-esteem, lose confidence, like that. And these people show up in our temples, and not nowadays. Everyone who shows up, I wouldn't say everyone, but most people, we could say everyone shows up with some baggage, and a lot more baggage than when I joined. That's what we're seeing. And so the real issue for sure.
Yeah, so the way people are brought up and what they experience in their childhood, and of course society, as we know, Kali Yuga is progressing, so it won't become better. It's interesting that you discriminate also, because we have to understand what we are talking about, because Srila Prabhupada spoke about madness or mental illness, but sometimes maybe more in a different way. Like Prabhupada would often quote Nunam Pramate Kurutevi Karma, like from Rishabdev's teaching, that when a person considers sense gratification the aim of life, he certainly becomes mad after materialistic living. And Prabhupada would also say that anyone who is not Krishna conscious is to be taken as crazy or mad, in a sense that just like a man who is haunted by a ghost. And so in this way, Prabhupada would say that people are mad in that sense, and they need to be cured by the chanting of the holy name.
Yeah, we see a lot of very depressed people become very happy, because that depression that Prabhupada's talking about is like people who are, you could say, quote unquote, normal, who are normal but crazily running after sense gratification and getting frustrated. Obviously, the mode of passion gives some pleasure, the mode of ignorance gives misery, beginning, middle, and end. But passion gives the suffering after. And there's very little sattva guna, if any, in people's lives, and mostly tamasy. So, and then the pressure to be, you're judged by your education, your income, your neighborhood, your clothes, your looks, your body, that's like, that's depressing for sure. And that's all you could say within the category of the kind of craziness if we're playing that game. So naturally, that's going to cause depression. And actually, Krishna consciousness can solve that because it helps us transcend or get over that. And at least in theory, although you have to be Krishna conscious, not just dressed like a devotee for that to happen. But in a sense, as society becomes more tamasic, it actually is bringing more people to Krishna consciousness because there's more. They're looking for ways to deal with their unhappiness or their depression, which is a natural byproduct of living this way, or how they were raised, and thinking about, what social media does. It's like you're just constantly comparing yourself to situations which aren't real, or comparing yourself to people who look happy that are faking it. And that's, it's like the way society is today. It's a setup. It is a madness. It's a setup for depression and frustration and low self-esteem, etc. So we can cure all of that, but if it's like results of trauma, sexual abuse, like raised in a very abusive family, something like that, then it often is going to require more than just the sadhana that we give people.
Yeah, that basically raises the question, how far do Srila Prabhupada's books go to help us with mental issues when it comes to really diseases, right? Because when do we actually better take help from a psychiatrist? And of course, some devotees may, argue or quote also Prabhupada saying like that psychiatrists are humbug and they cannot really help, and best thing is to just be engaged constantly in chanting Hare Krishna, and then one will be cured from mental disease. So
you remember that story where this devotee asked Prabhupada for some money because he wanted to get gasoline, pour it on himself and light himself. He wanted to get some gasoline, some petrol, pour the petrol on his body, light it, and burn himself up. You know that story?
Like,
so Brahmananda was there. He was the treasurer. And Prabhupada said, "Do we have any money for him?" And Brahmananda said, "No, we don't." Prabhupada said, "I'm sorry, we can't give you the money to, commit suicide." So, Prabhupada knew this person was not mentally stable. So when Prabhupada says psychiatrists can't help, I also heard from Yogeshwara Prabhu, who said that Prabhupada brought his son to a psychiatrist and it helped for a while. So which psychiatrist, which person, what's the disease, I think we know today that there are lots of therapies that are helpful for victims who've been abused. Like a pervasive low self-esteem problem, which is a result, in one sense, of people who were put down when they were young. And they don't have a real sense of who they are, value themselves. And Prabhupada was always encouraging us, building our self-esteem. But, there are, I don't know if you want to call them therapies, but there are things we can learn to help some of our issues. And a lot of the help, I wouldn't call it psychiatry. I would just call it like, understanding the mind and how the mind works. And so that's a better Krishna conscious context. Because when you say psychiatry or therapy, then some devotees may think, oh, that's, it's very humanistic, secular, hedonistic, materialistic, and so forth. But many of the things that I've learned about how to deal with personal issues are really, I would say, in the context of learning how the mind works. Because the mind, as we know, can be this huge enemy. And just learning how to deal with that. And, you could call it psychology, but it's just like, it's not that we're against psychology. Psychology is to deal with the mind in a way that it can use it, be our friend to help us. So, and then being able to distinguish, where Krishna consciousness helps and where it doesn't, so that we can get proper treatment if there are more clinical issues that are affecting our lives. So where we've tried to apply Krishna consciousness, but we need more. That's important. And it's important for leaders also to understand that.
Mm.
And you can try to help a devotee spiritually, and they will be helped spiritually, but it may not address other issues, psychological, emotional, mental health issues. And so it's important for leaders to understand that also. And leaders inadvertently can make it worse by giving instructions that don't take into consideration the sensitivities of the traumas the devotee has been through, especially if they've been abused sexually, verbally, emotionally. It's very sensitive. If you don't know how to deal with them, you can actually make the situation worse in the name of preaching.
Mm.
I've seen that many times.
Mm. Yeah,
So I think we need to be practical about this thing. See what works, what doesn't. It's like you do a kirtan, So it's like, well, let's have a bass guitar, a guitar, a keyboard, this and that. And so the question is, well, do you really need it? Like, how much do you really need? And so say, well, in this situation, it's so busy on the street. If we don't cut through all the noise, they won't notice it. So and people come, we get 100 people instead of 3. Say, okay. So it's something like that. Do I need something more than Krishna consciousness? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But we would have to see individually.
And to see whether it's helpful, whether it's actually favorable for our Krishna consciousness,
Yeah.
should accept it. And yeah. And I know you also just mentioned, like, in some way, it's all about also how to deal with the mind, how to control the mind. And there actually, Srila Prabhupada's books give us a lot in a sense of mind control and understanding the mind. Yeah. So when we talk about, like, beside of the real mental illness that we just mentioned, but just for devotees in general, to be more balanced in their life and to be, we say, don't be mental, like to avoid being on a mental platform, or just to have a more healthy life. I think there Prabhupada gives us a lot of instructions, right?
Yes.
In the sense of how.
Well, one of the most interesting instructions is the 6 principles of surrender. The first 2 principles of the 6 that are given in Chaitanya Charitamrita. To accept everything which is favorable and avoid everything which is not favorable. So, if I willingly am doing something unfavorable for my spiritual life, which would include my emotional, physical life, because it often affects my spiritual life. Or if I do something on the material level or the emotional level, which is having a negative effect on my spiritual life, or just general neglect of my spiritual life, I'm doing something unfavorable, and therefore I become my enemy. And we do many of these things, and we have opportunities all the time to do favorable things, which we don't do. So if we were actually following these 2 points of surrender, this would be an extreme high level of mental health, because we would become the friend in the full sense. There would be no enemy. And one time Prabhupada was asked, well, what's the biggest obstacle to bhakti? And he said, you yourself. You're the obstacle, you get in the way. In other words, we make so many choices, but we've been given instructions. These are the choices to make, but doesn't mean we're going to take them. And so Prabhupada said, I can't help you if you don't take the instruction. So if Prabhupada gives me an instruction and I don't take it, then I've become my own enemy in a sense, because I've been given everything I need, but I'm not utilizing it. I'm choosing to go another way. So that is how we I think, can contextualize the idea of self-help in the ultimate sense, that everything we do should be bringing us closer to Krishna, and we should avoid everything that would take us further away. Now, sometimes when people have serious mental illnesses, they can't do that. They'll, some people have they just don't feel any value to themselves, and they actually feel they deserve to suffer, or they don't care. They become apathetic, or they're addicted to something and they lose control. And so these are situations in which devotees are going to need more help. And you might say, well, but so many people were addicted and they took to Krishna consciousness and they gave up their addictions. It's true. And so many have not. So you can't generalize. You have to deal with yourself specifically. Okay, in theory, I should be able to give it up, but practically, if I'm not giving it up, then now I'm unable to follow that instruction and do what's favorable because I'm too weak and I will need help to control myself. For example, I do a course on sexual purity, and it's really a course which can help those who want to be sexually pure. But if one is sexually addicted, it helps, but not entirely. It's totally based on Prabhupada's books. At the end of the course, I say, if you feel you're going to need more help than this, you should join a 12-step program like Sexaholics Anonymous or a similar program. We have Bhakti Recovery Group. It's a 12-step program for devotees. And I know many devotees who I've sent to these programs, and it was the only way they could deal with it. The beauty of the 12-step program is very Krishna conscious. So you depend on God. That's where you get your strength from. And so, we have to be realistic about these things. It's just, what we lack in Krishna consciousness is, as you know, Prabhupada's books are not a systematic presentation by topic. So you can't just go to addiction. Okay, all the chapters in the Gita and Bhagavatam and CC on addiction, all the chapters on mental illness, all the processes we need to follow. So that's what I've done. I've gone through it, extracted it, added exercises by which we could apply what Prabhupada is teaching. So now you get it in one place. And I found it to be very effective. So, but some devotees are going to need that. It's not, there you go. They'll just need help. That's okay. Take it. And then you're your friend. Now you're your friend. So I took help from a 12-step program or whatever. I took help, but I'm better. So that means you're now your friend. If you don't take help and you need it, then you're acting as your enemy. Who's going to help you if you don't? You think, okay, eventually I'll become Krishna conscious. But the problem is, if you have a serious mental health issue or psychological issue or addiction, and you think, well, as I become Krishna conscious, I'll cure it, and that's not happening, you're being handicapped by that problem, and that's why it's not happening. You have to remove that problem, so your practice of sadhana becomes stronger, and then that sadhana will keep you going. But sometimes, until you remove that problem, which you're not able to remove because your sadhana is not strong, or that problem is just a deeply emotional issue that sadhana is not meant to heal, then you have to take another vow. It is really, if you want to look at it philosophically, it's just learning to live in sattva guna, really, when it comes down to it. There's all the craziness in sattva guna. In Ayurveda, if you study Ayurveda, all the mental illnesses are, they'll look at physical illnesses and how they relate to mental illnesses. Change your diet, changes your mind. It's like you sleep too much, how it affects your consciousness. So, it's a holistic process. So sometimes solutions are physical. You need to sleep more or less, or you need to change your diet. You're not getting exercise, your mind is suffering, there's no happy hormones, you're sitting too much, whatever. So, okay, you need to dance more in kirtan, go more japa works.
Yeah, that's an interesting point with the gunas, because sometimes devotees underestimate the power of actually applying these knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita. I think from the 700 shlokas, about 100 shlokas deal with the gunas. So Krishna gives a lot of emphasis on learning and understanding how the gunas work. And in preparation of this conversation, I was also thinking, actually, if we just follow these instructions and really apply a very sattvic lifestyle, then our mind would become very, very peaceful.
Yeah. And most of the, have you ever listened to any talks on how to be happy? Not from devotees, but from non-devotees. And they'll say things like, be grateful, be forgiving, be kind, serve others. It's all sattva guna. And we know Krishna says in sattva guna, you'll be happy. And we know someone who's practicing Krishna consciousness, well, they're happy. And, a big problem for us is sattva guna is really important for us. More important than for anybody, because sattva guna is where we align with our values. And so if I'm not a devotee and I'm doing something bad, I don't even know it's bad. So it's not causing me depression like it would for a devotee who knows they should be in sattva guna, but they're in tamaguna. If I'm in tamaguna as a non-devotee, I could enjoy it, so to speak. I like it, staying up late at night, getting high on whatever, sleeping all during the day, going back out at night, partying all night. But for us as devotees, we have this situation where we can become depressed just by not being sattvic because we know we should be. And I find that a real impetus to be more sattvic, because if I don't live my values, I'm going to become quite unhappy, and I will feel guilty, even shameful of my activities. And so you were asking what the causes of depression. We have added causes as devotees. If I'm not following, if I'm not in integrity with what I believe, it's very depressing, and it's very discouraging. And shame is a very painful emotion, and all devotees have felt it at some point because we're not perfect. And Prabhupada has helped us deal with that also. I sometimes joke with devotees that it's like if you join a religious movement, well, it's not really a joke, but it's funny in a philosophical way. If you join a religious movement, it's a perfect setup for guilt. And especially if you have a guilty conscience, you're like, this is your place. You can find 108 reasons every day to feel guilty.
Because we have such high ideals in Krishna, very high ideals, and then we know that we are standing somewhere else, and then that constant,
Exactly. So I've spoken a lot about this because I'm very concerned about it, because I see devotees who should be happy and could be happy if they just understood how to deal with this reality that you will sometimes fail. And that is normal. And it's a gradual process. And your real asset is your sincerity, your endeavor. Not that we make excuses for failing, that we want to fail. But your effort, Krishna says in Mahabharata, it's your effort that is your success. I try to go out and open a temple. I knew a devotee opened a temple in the wrong city. He was there for 7 years, made like 3 devotees. It was the wrong city. It was a very, very conservative area. And he could have felt like a total failure. And in another area, he probably would have made 50 devotees. And maybe been able to build a temple because he'd have such a big congregation. But if we look at the effort we're making and we try to be sincere and we know we're doing our best, we can celebrate that, even though we're not able to achieve what we want or able to be what we want. In our self-care course, we deal with this weaponizing Shastra. You're familiar with this term, weaponizing Shastra? You use Shastra to shame yourself or shame somebody. You're not, I give a class and make everybody feel bad if they're not like super pure devotees. That's called weaponizing Shastra, and so we do that to ourselves a lot. where we read about an exalted devotee, or we see an exalted devotee, and then we think, I can't be that way, and I just feel like giving up, as opposed to being inspired by that story or inspired by that devotee, which is what we should be. But because we're not accepting where we're at as normal reality of who I am, and hoping to be somewhere above my adhikari, my qualifications, then becoming discouraged or depressed that I'm not here. It's really a recipe for feeling bad, guilty, shameful, or depressed, discouraged. And we've seen that. It is very common. And then add to that kitri artificial humility, because we're trying to understand humility, and we're trying to understand it from those who are actually humble, who aren't faking it, and we don't understand it, and then we imitate it. And that's kind of like the icing on the cake. You know, I'm lower than the lowest lower. No, that's a realization of respect for all living entities. It's not a low place when you say that, but when we say it, because we're not on that level, it becomes a low place for us. That is sad. I'm sure you've seen this. Maybe you've gone through it yourself. It's very sad, and it's kind of like a natural progression. Everybody goes through it. You know, we always feel like we're failing in some way. And you know, isn't it like sad if I read a story or I associate with a devotee who is very advanced, read a story about a very advanced devotee or associate with a very advanced devotee, and I just become discouraged? When I could become so inspired by that devotee or that story if I were just be able to accept myself with all my faults as this is just who I am. And then I could take advantage. I wouldn't be jealous of anybody. I wouldn't be discouraged by hearing about pure devotional service, which is so ironical because it's not supposed to discourage us. But you know, some people with extreme low self-esteem or who just are normally healthy people can become a little disoriented when they become devotees because of these things, and they're not unhealthy otherwise. And so it's important to understand Prabhupada's books properly. For us as Prabhupada disciples, it's a challenge, but not as much because we know how encouraging Prabhupada was, and he didn't make us feel guilty. In general, he was just made a mistake, just solve the problem, everything's okay. Don't live in the past. But those who didn't have that association, it could be quite easy to feel guilty about our lackings. And Prabhupada wasn't a judgmental person. He was a loving person. And as he loved us in spite of our faults, we need to accept ourselves in a similar way. And then it's okay. If we don't do that, then it's really, really difficult. Can be difficult. In our self-care course, after teaching it many times, I realized the problem that many devotees have is that if they're berating themselves, I'm so bad, not accepting themselves, then it's very difficult for them to accept Krishna's love, even the love of others, because they don't feel like they're worthy of it. And so when they get it, it just like slips right out of like the hole in the bottom of their heart. It just goes in and goes out. And that's unfortunate if I can't accept Krishna's love because I feel there's something wrong with it. But many devotees feel that way. I'm unworthy of his love.
Mm.
And I understand some people come with that feeling because very bad parenting that they went through, their parents made them feel that way. But I think some people feel that way after they become devotees, which is very sad. Why would Krishna love me? I'm so sinful. It's probably because they're lacking some ability to accept themselves with all their faults. And we have to learn how to do that because we have them. And they go away, faults go away gradually. And we do fall, we do slip. And I think we make more of often we make a big deal about it in ways Prabhupada didn't. And I'll tell you a story. It's a beautiful story. I don't think anybody knows this story. But there was a devotee couple who went to see Srila Prabhupada, and they were following, I think maybe they were taking drugs, and they told Prabhupada, we're following all the principles of this one. What do we do? And etc. It could have been illicit sex, could have been drugs. I remember drugs, but that's not important. And recently, Prabhupada got a letter, a similar situation, a letter from a devotee who was not always following all the principles. And so when these devotees that were with Prabhupada asked their question, what do we do? We're not following all the principles. Prabhupada said, get that letter. He said to his secretary, get the letter. And he said, read the letter. The devotee described. Basically, I'm trying, but I fall. Then I get up. A few months, it's good. Then I slip. A few months, it's good. Then I slip. What to do? Why is this happening? Etc. And Prabhupada turned to those devotees and he said, just see. He was glorifying this devotee. He said, just see how he's struggling for Krishna.
Mm.
Wow.
Mm.
That's how Prabhupada is seeing it, like glorious. So in our self-care workshop, I realized that we really need this attitude. Instead of looking at, oh, I have weakness and difficulty, look at the fact that in spite of your weakness and difficulty, you're still a devotee. It's a completely different way of looking at it.
Mm.
And it's like, yeah, I have this like deep attachment to whatever it is, to false ego, to lust, to greed. I've been dealing with it the whole time I've been a devotee, but I'm still a devotee. Well, that's glorious. And that's what Prabhupada is saying. And then Prabhupada said, Krishna likes to see his devotees struggle. So what's the struggle? In spite of all the desire, I'm still going on, still going forward. And we don't generally look at ourselves that way. Well, that's how Krishna looks. Krishna, as I said, in Mahabharata, he said, if you endeavor but you fail, it's merit. Your action is full of merit, the merit of the effort. I think that's really a really important point in dealing with the discouragement, which could lead to depression from failing and not being good enough in comparison, envy of those who are better, etc. But just be, look at yourself and say, are you trying? Are you, sometimes your best will not be good enough because it's just who we are. But are you trying? Are you sincere? Are you here to please Krishna? Then give yourself a pat on the back. I'm not saying it's an excuse for failing or falling down, but I'm saying most of us, in spite of our difficulties, are still going on. So we're not really falling so much. We're just failing to be pure devotees on the level that Bhagavatam is directing us. Okay, that's true. That doesn't mean we're failing.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's true.
That's a very powerful point. And personally, I feel when I read Prabhupada's purports, I mean, of course, in one say, yes, there is all these high levels of Krishna consciousness that are described.
Yes.
But on the other hand, we also see how Prabhupada very much emphasized the power of bhakti. Like Prabhupada always, again and again, glorifies bhakti.
Yeah.
And that can be very encouraging to see that actually, yes, I might be fallen, but the process of bhakti is so powerful. So that should give... So taking it back to reading Prabhupada's books, I think if devotees study Prabhupada's books deeply, if they read Prabhupada's books, they also can find that encouragement, that how wonderful bhakti actually is. Would you agree? Yeah.
Well, if you study Prabhupada's books, you will start to notice that sincerity is the main qualification. If you're worried about your qualification, you will find sincerity. And sincerity means anyabhilashita shunyam, serving for the pleasure of Krishna. And so the beauty of that is you and I and all of us can be sincere. And how did Prabhupada say you become sincere? By being sincere. So that means we all have it within our fists. We can do it.
Mm.
And we can be, we can decide, I'm going to serve Krishna for your pleasure. Even though I have so many desires, I can decide to serve Krishna for his pleasure. So that's beautiful. And if we, one of the problems is it's such an ironic problem. I don't understand how devotees have fallen. I don't completely understand it. Maybe I don't want to understand it. I guess I can't understand it. Sometimes when devotees have difficulty, it's at that time they stop reading.
Mm.
So isn't that the time you should be reading more? But they get discouraged. And then they think, well, what's the use of reading? I've already read it. It didn't help. But we have the other side of the story where devotees say, yeah, whenever I have difficulties, somehow or other, I just open any book and there's the answer I need. We've heard that story many, so we've heard both stories many times.
Yeah.
And, I think Prabhupada, my realization from reading Prabhupada's books is he knew every obstacle we're going to face. And he's giving us directions on how to deal with it. And even if we have to go beyond those instructions because we have severe problems we have to address, it's still Prabhupada's directing us how to live in a way that will be in the best possible position to deal with those problems, the sattvic position. I hear something really interesting. When I developed the self-care course, some devotees were saying, well, Prabhupada doesn't talk about self-care in his books. And then you ever hear the saying, well, all you have to do is understand one verse of the Gita, and that's all you need. You ever heard that before? It was like one of the first things I heard as a young devotee as I was studying the Gita. You just understand one verse. Well, what does that mean? If I understand one verse, that means I'll surrender to Krishna. And the whole Bhagavatam is to help us surrender to Krishna. The whole Gita, obviously, to help us surrender to Krishna. And so, therefore, I said, I was joking but serious to the devotees. I said, well, how many verses in the Gita do you think deal with self-care? And someone might think, yuktahara viharasya. Other than that, I don't know. Balance your eating and your recreation, and so forth. I said, no, every verse. Because every verse will get you to surrender. And what greater interest is it for you than to surrender to Krishna and go back to God? So every verse is about self-care. So if we follow every verse properly, we'll give our life to Krishna and we'll be our ever well-wisher. We'll be our own benefactor. I think that it's important to understand that Prabhupada wants us to go back to God, and everything he's teaching is to help us get out of this world. And that every difficulty has a silver lining, for sure. And don't give up. The goal is too big and too valuable.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mahatma Prabhu, for this insights. Maybe to come to a conclusion, what do you think are some of the most valuable instructions Srila Prabhupada has given us in regard to mental health, or maybe how could Srila Prabhupada's books help the world to overcome these mental issues? Like in the sense of the significance of Prabhupada's books, or the contribution that Prabhupada's books can give to them in this regard.
There's a lot of teaching in Prabhupada's books about how to deal with others. We have examples in the lives of devotees of how they were mistreated, even some attempts at killing them, and how they responded in a completely compassionate, forgiving way. And in those stories, Prabhupada talks about how you treat others is how you treat yourself. If I hate you, so I suffer. If I don't forgive you, I suffer. If I show compassion to you, if I forgive you, I benefit. So there are so many teachings in Prabhupada's books teaching us how to act properly. And those actions will save us from so much mental distress, because so much of that mental distress is self-created. Because we're not willing to forgive, we're not willing to be kind to someone who wasn't kind to us, or we're not tolerating something, including tolerating ourselves. Or also, if you read Prabhupada's books, he will help you understand the importance of your own sadhana. And so sometimes we neglect our sadhana because we're not taking care of our spiritual life well. And so that will also help us. There's so much emphasis on spiritual practice and balance. So I don't think, I've always thought that Prabhupada's books are as integral to the process of Krishna consciousness as anything else. You can't, it's what they say, wheat, rice, and beans make a complete protein. Like, so you take one of those out and you don't get all the amino acids or whatever the problem is. So I see Prabhupada books like that. It's like, it's an ingredient within the mix of a complete bhakti protein. And if you pull that out, you're going to have trouble because you're missing those proteins. And if devotees use that analogy, I think it can help them. It's like, it's not optional. It's not like sometimes once a week I eat the complete protein. No, it's like every day. And you have the best chance of being a balanced sattvic person if you're studying Prabhupada's books, because it gives you the inspiration and strength to be your sadhana, to resist temptation, resist doing the things that are harmful, and become inspired, and ultimately inspired to share his book, which is the best thing you can do for yourself, is share this knowledge.
Thank you so much.
Say for now.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mahatma Prabhu, for sharing this with us.
You're welcome.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hari Om. Jai Prabhupada. Go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.